Hey lads, Shoes here, This Irish Life. Welcome back. Buried Ireland, episode 10, part 10. We have reached the conclusion of our story, and now is the time to wrap up our supernatural tale and recap and draw some conclusions as to what the world is now and what the world possibly was. And in order to do that, we're going to dip into, I suppose it's a topic where you have to suspend your belief and you have to consider, you have to open your mind, um, even if you're just entertaining it for entertainment's sake. I think that you have to just take all of this with a pinch of salt, for one thing, and just take it as a fun exercise into the past. Maybe this did happen. Maybe something like this did happen, and as fantastical as it sounds, there seems to be a trail of breadcrumbs that leads to the conclusions that I'm going to discuss. And even though the conclusions that are being drawn are, I suppose, in line with the mud flood, they're in line with the tales of the gods of old, they're in line with the gigantic infrastructure that we see all over the place, whether they be pyramids or government buildings or libraries or star fortresses, towers, cathedrals, churches, whatever. That even though this story seems to fit, we have to always remember the trick of reality at the end of this. Like, even in the face of what seems to be a fairly straightforward story, I'm sure if somebody wanted to pick all of this apart, they could probably find enough to pick it apart at the same time. So, going on with the idea of that the reality or the matrix or wherever it is that we are gives us the pieces that we need to build our own picture for whatever conclusion it is that we want to draw for ourselves. And we keep going down these endless rabbit holes. And like the rabbit hole, like we'll see here when we discover this part of the rabbit hole, of which there'll probably be multiple parts again, I'm sure. But it just keeps on going back and back, and you can probably go back in rabbit holes till the end of time and multiple parallel realities or cells, realms, different shapes and sizes, and I mean, who knows? So we at this time, we have the privilege of being able to consider information like this and have the enjoyment of imagining whether or not it happened or didn't happen. But always the point is to remember that we're here for our own experience, and we need to make the best of that experience for ourselves, and being I wouldn't say distracted, but it's almost entertainment. Like, to me, this is entertainment. Just exploring all of this stuff, it was just great fun. Blew my mind a couple of times. Like, I don't know what's true, what's not. Am I seeing, like, for what I can see, it all adds up, you know? But I'm sure, as I said, if somebody wanted to come in and try and say the exact opposite, I'm sure you'd find enough evidence to say the opposite as well. I don't know this reality, and this place is crazy. All I know is that I know nothing, and I'm just exploring and turning up a few stones along the way, and these are the stones that I've turned up. So in this continuation of the tale, and in this conclusion of the tale, which you took with me on the last, 20 hours of previous research into the topic, the areas that we're going to cover are varied and wide and fantastical. It's an epic tale, the tale where it seems that a certain race or certain section of a race who were in the slave class of the old world, the slave class seemed to have overtaken the previous elites and the elites of the old world, who would have been the gods of the old world. So the story seems to tell the tale of the slaves and the slaves' takeover. And it's a tale that we followed with the ancient ruins. We've looked at the masonry, we've looked at pyramids, we've looked at bridges. We've gone on a whirlwind tour of masonry across Ireland. The stories of the gods and the stories of men, the Tuatha Dé Danann, the Fir Bolg, the Fomorians, the Milesians. We've had St. Patrick in there. These tales, it seems that they're retelling the tales over and over again. Where did they come from? We looked at the world and we found that, was it a canal civilization? Were they crystal canal cities? Is the limestone infrastructure that we're looking at, is that the remains of these crystal canal cities, programmed crystal canals? Is that possible? Where are we today? Is it possible? Water, the canals and the water interacting with the crystal masonry, leading to a different type of energy, feeding the cathedrals, feeding the world, feeding the energy of the world, allowing them powers and abilities that maybe were beyond their ability in a time where this technology is not available. Canals everywhere. We saw that. We're going to dive through this in the next however long it takes, but we're going to recap the tales in a different way, and we're going to package it up nice. We're going to look at crystal avatars, crystal androids. Is it possible? Could they have had like a programmable crystal, like a T1000 type of technology? Why not? That's where we're progressing to now. So, it's worth considering, and it's worth opening the mind to in the light of this story. Was this Atlantis? Is another question we're gonna consider. Is this the old Atlantis that was destroyed for their misuse of the crystal technology, which we'll see from some of the channeled material. Not that I'd give a huge credence to channeled material, but it's interesting that this material is out there and that it correlates. It's just an epic tale, and we're going to get into it. Are we living in a terraformed place? What was this place? Did somebody come in and cut down the original Garden of Eden? The trees and the mushrooms, the giant trees and the mushrooms, the giant flora and the giant fauna. Did they cut it down to create this crystal world? Did they use the divine natural material, the divine material that is nature, that is trees, that has the power of nature and the divine nature within it, not a programmable crystal type of artificial construct, but the the product of the garden. And did they come in and mine the Garden of Eden and essentially just build this star civilization on top of it? Is that what happened? Is that beyond the realms of possibility? And then something happened. They were destroyed, and now we're back to nature again. Now we're back at nature. We have trees and mud, and it's just rugged, and there's dirt on everything, and it's covering everything, and there's sand everywhere, and there's rubble everywhere, there's bogs everywhere, there's water everywhere. It's a totally different world than the world that was terraformed beneath that mud, which is what we looked at in this series. So right now, to me, we're in the new Stone Age. To reference the movie The Matrix and Neolithic. So neo meaning new and lithic meaning stone. So the new Stone Age. I think that's what it means anyway. I have it written down here. Can't remember checking that for sure though. But Neo as a reference to the Matrix, and Neo, it just caught my attention. So was this like a Matrix, like even that crystal world? And this is the new Matrix, the Neolithic, the stone world, the stone Matrix, where we don't have most of the power, any of the powers, but it's much more natural. But you also, alongside it, we have the technology world. So we have the two worlds in parallel now. And I suppose that's where the future is going to lead, and we're going to have a choice as to which one we fancy. But we're certainly in the new Stone Age, that is for sure. So getting into it, we're going to go right back to the beginning, and we're going to talk about pre-flood. And pre-flood, we had the stories of the Anunnaki, who created man in order to work in the mines. So essentially, the Anunnaki, they were the invaders of a previous world. So they were the miners, the original miners in Sumerian history. And Enki was one of the main. He was one of the top people, the top ranked. He was a lord of Earth. So he was in charge of this colony, essentially, is what the story says. But they altered humans, not humans, they altered the existing species, the story goes, in order to create humans. So Enki, he is a character that we can equate quite similarly to the Dagda. But also he is the equivalent to many other gods. He has a son in this dynasty called Marduk, who we will also equate to possibly Angus, the son of Boan. And what we're going to see is that the stories of these histories kind of intermingle with each other in this odd two-age, before the flood, after the flood type of scenario. And what I'm trying to show in this final conclusion is that the world of the crystal canal cities seems to have been after the flood rather than before the flood. So what existed before the flood, I'm not sure. whether before the flood was an Adam and Eve type of Garden of Eden scenario, with natural magical powers, or whether there was an existing crystal civilization beforehand. But the stories go, so the equivalent of this guy here, Enki, he tends to be the main god and the main power on the earth in the Anunnaki tales, in the tales of Samaria. And he's also mirrored by a god in the Hindu or the Vedas, so the Indian mythology, called Indra. And Indra is the god who was given the responsibility of fixing the earth after a great war with what were they called? Was it the Vitras? I can't remember the name. I thought, oh yeah, it was the Vitra who obstructs human prosperity and happiness. So this deceiving, invading force, Indra destroys, and there is an end of the world scenario that happens, and then a new world begins. And in the new world, Indra is given responsibility for creating this new world after this great battle. So there is a great battle and a great divide between the two worlds. And I'm wondering that the story of the flood and the great flood, I'm wondering that is it a mixture of kind of two events, but it was a flood, like there was two events and there was two floods, but they were completely different. That you had, first of all, a great flood caused by a titanic war, and then secondly, you had a great flood caused by opening up all of the mines and the Starfort mega wells. So one of them ended the God world and the second one ended the Atlantean world. And what we're going to discuss is the end of the Atlantean world. And the person who fixed this world seems to be Indra, also could be Noah, Janus, and he is the equivalent of Noah, and he is the primary progenitor of most of the mythical races of men. And most races take some sort of lineage from Noah after the flood. So what seems to have happened is that there was an invasion and the people who were here fought off the invasion. But there was a great cataclysm which destroyed the world. And this is the Noah's flood scenario that they presented. But I'm starting to wonder now, because this is a common theme in a lot of the other stories, like the invader, like when the invader wins, of course the invader is going to pretend that he lost. So I'm wondering that, did Indra win this war? So the war that they spoke about in the Vedas, like, did we lose this war from the get-go? And that the Vitra is in charge ever since, and that even in Atlantis, when Indra was rebuilding, maybe the Vitra was already here. Maybe the Vitra is the miners, maybe they have presented themselves as these. They've presented themselves as they always do, as the old dynasties. So they pretend to be the ruling elite. They pretend to be the kings and the queens. but they're not. So this is what I'm starting to think and wonder, is that, like, are they're just here ever since, and they've always been here, and they're related to any sort of, possibly related to the AI as well. Like, I mean, is that where the crystal cities came from? And we've got ancient Greece, and we've got the Hindu tales of the flood as well. Ordered King Manu to construct a huge boat. So we're looking at the end of the Noah's flood. So at the end of the flood, the second age began, or another age. We don't know, is it the second age or the fifth age or what age it is. But I'm thinking that at the end of Noah's flood, there was the end of an age. And at the end of that age, the Star Canal civilization was created, I'm thinking. And then at the end, and then that ended. That Star Canal civilization was much bigger in landmass than we have today. There was more land masses that had it. So with that, we're going to skip to the story of the Lower Gwala Éireann, and that's where we took our story from. So we pick up after the flood here. So we've got the flood. There was some titanic war with some invader, and after the flood, the land was rebuilt, and it was recolonized. I don't know, was this when they put, I have a feeling it was. I have a feeling that they used technology to rebuild the world that they had lost. So I feel that there was less technology in the older world than the one before this one. So the Lower Gwala Éireann, that's what talks about the people who settled Ireland. And we have the Caesarians, the Partholon, we have the Nemedians, the Fir Bolg, the Tuatha De Danann, and we have the Milesians. I think that most, if not all, of these people are the same people. And that's what my conclusion is for the most part. And that they are essentially a group of the children of Maid. They're like a group of three of each. So there's three clans of Fir Bolg, as we'll see in a minute. And then they just pretend that one is the other, and they play them off against each other in the stories. But what is true is that there was battles, by the looks of it, and there was carnage in this old world. But this old world of the Partholonians and the Medians, this was towards the end of Atlantis, I would be saying. And I think that at the end of Atlantis, it's the end of this Crystal Canal civilization is when these tales are taking place. So there's going to be some information in here as well that I'm just not even going to discuss, and it's more there if you want to follow up on it. So there's going to be a lot of repeating, and for this episode there's going to be quite a bit of writing, but we're going to get into some pictures in the next sections. So we're just setting the scene here. We're setting the story of the people of the land, and most of this information is for your reference and just to give me a bit of a steer. But I'm not going to be reading really any of it. So the story of Ireland centres around several battles which are taking place in the site of Moy Conga, which is in the west of Ireland near Mayo, or in Mayo in fact. And it's in this area that we focused a lot of our attention during during the research and during the investigation of the landscape. We looked at the landscape in this area. So there's two battles of Moytura. The first one is between the Tuatha De Danann and the Fair Bolg, and the second one is between the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomorians. But once again, as I said, I think that these battles, while they may have taken place, I don't think that it's necessarily between these people that the battles were definitely taking place. And the battles that they're speaking of, the final battles, I'm wondering, are these the battles where the invader took over at the end of the second fall, or the second, what we think of as the flood or the mud flood is the end of Atlantis. But it wasn't a great flood, it was a mining induced mega well meltdown. So we had the second battle as well then, which we looked at, and that was the Tuatha De Danann, and we looked at the why that battle took place. We spoke about the stories of it. We went into different areas of the land, looked over it. And once again, with all of this, you can look back in the other episodes and you can see in detail and discussions around all of these topics here. But that's what we were discussing. And we were looking at Ireland from the point of view of the mud flood and, why is all the landscape covered? And this is the context that we were looking at it from, through the eyes of these tales. We looked at the River Boyne then on the opposite side of Ireland, and that's in the area of County Meath, where an awful lot of history also took place. And we went through the stories of the Boyne, and we looked in detail at the area of Slane, Hill of Tara. We went into and we looked and we identified several underground forts and fortifications, gigantic fortifications now, not little wooden ones. So we looked into that area. We also looked at the lakes, and we looked at Lough Key in the centre of Ireland. And this was a lake. Lakes play a prominent role, as do mountains, in all of the battles. So people tend to go to mountains and they go to lakes during battles. So what was going on in the mountains and the lakes is what we were looking at during this investigation. Another topic that came up was the idea of wells, so healing wells, magical wells. So we looked at the magical well. There's one in Moytura, a well of healing, and there is Slán as well. No, where's the one in Moytura? The Field of the Apple Tree is the one in Moytura, and then Slán as well in Slane, which we'll look at in a moment. So there was a curing well. There was curing wells all around the place, and there was magic happening. So were they using the crystals in order to create the magic? What were they doing with, how were they creating these curing waters? Was it the crystal technology? Is that what it was? The stories of them. They dropped stones in the well to stop the Tuatha De Danann from reviving their dead and injured during the second battle of Moytura. So they targeted the wells, and then if you look at what is a well, we saw that the wells are actually the abbeys by the looks of it. And the tech that was in the abbeys, so where the monks apparently were filling out all of the old manuscripts, those abbeys have the tech in them to be the wells, and they literally just flooded all of those abbeys and destroyed them. And they actually also exist, the wells also exist on top of heavy masonry and large pyramids, by the looks of it as well, within the Star civilization. So, and there's 3,000 holy wells in Ireland, So we're looking at the wells, and we're looking at the landscape then with these eyes. We're looking at the Boyne Canal as well. There's canal systems all over the world, all over Ireland. Ireland is like all the rivers are canals, but this is the smoking gun, the Boyne Canal, we saw running in the River Boyne. Like the Boyne is a mud-flooded gigantic canal, is what it is, that has multiple canal systems within it that run under multiple bridges. So you see those bridges will have multiple arches. Well, each arch is likely connected to a separate little canal waterway. The water wasn't always as high as it is today. So that was, and then we saw the Con Canal, which was over on the west of Ireland, and that was another smoking gun. And we looked at that. So there was more canals. This was a useless canal that was built for no reason apparently whatsoever, but it's old infrastructure. And then we were asking the question, Atlantis. Is this Atlantis? Like Atlantis, obviously they say Atlantis was a land in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and maybe it was. But was the civilization of the world that existed in that Atlantean world, was that a crystal canal civilization? Is that what was going on? It was a high technology crystal canal civilization that was created after the Great Flood in order to canal the waters and re-establish control over the land. I don't know what was there before the flood, but this is the question, or this is a question that I think is worth pondering. So with the stories of Ireland, Caesar, this is the first group, the Caesarians. They came to Ireland before the flood. Bith, the son of Noah, came with his daughter Caesar to Ireland to avoid the flood. And they went to the Slieve, so they went to the mountains, is where they went. Slieve Baha, Bith's mountain. So we didn't look at that, but we're just setting the scene here. So the Caesarians were the first, so they came. But I'm saying, are the Caesarians, are they the same people as the Partholonians? The Partholonians are another group of people. They're the second group of people that supposedly came to Ireland. Supposedly all the Caesarians, they died in the flood. And the Partholonians settled Ireland after the flood. So Partholonians, they say, were the first people here. So as such, so the Caesarians, they say the Caesarians were before the flood and they died in the flood. So I would say the Caesarians are pre the big battle that caused the flood, during the War of the Giants, potentially. So that first fall, the Battle of Indra and the Vedas, the Rig Veda, and then we had Noah's flood. And then came the rebuilding, and the Partholonians were the first. They were the first people. But they are also very, very paralleled to the not the Fomorians. They're parallel to the Firbolg, and the Firbolg are parallel to the Fomorians. So the other group, as in when the Partholonians and the Caesarians came here, the Fomorians were already here. So the Fomorians were on the island of Ireland before anybody else, before the flood, and after the flood. So that lends to the idea that they were possibly the remains of some of the races that were injured in the Great War before Noah's flood. The ones that were possibly poisoned by the radiation that was spoken about in Lana's book, Lana Cantrell, the greatest story ever told. Were they this despicable race that they were depicted as? Because they were also the race that are heavily linked to the Tuatha Dé Danann. And the Tuatha Dé Danann, they basically are married into each other. So the Fomorians and the Tuatha Dé Danann, this other race here, they had all the children of the pantheon of Irish gods, essentially. Next we had the sons of Maid, and the Nemedians were once again going back to Noah, again, the Maid, son of Aganoman of Scythia. But once again, the story, they mirror each other very, very similarly. The Nemedians are also the relations to the Firbolgs that we'll see in a moment as well. So like these are all, like, if you're going into the detail on these, which we did, we're not going into the detail again. All of these races, it's all like they're overlaid on top of each other. They're all the same, and there's an invader. You know, they're all aspects of the same race. And these are the ones here. So the Firbolg are the ones that seem to be, they're the same gods. That the Firbolg are the Fomorians, they are the Partholonians, they are the Nemedians. They are all of them. And the Firbolg are the ones that, the Firbolg are actually, they are the people who who covered all of Europe, right up to up into Scandinavia, down into Spain, and across over to Greece. They are the race of Europe, the Firbolg, by the looks of it. But in Irish history, we are equating the Firbolg to the clans, the three clans that are spoken of separately. So the Fomorians, the Tuatha Dé Danann, and the Firbolg. And we'll just have a quick look at the Firbolg, because to just explain it in slightly more detail, they divided Ireland amongst themselves, and they were divided into several groups. So Sláine, who was the leader, Sláine is the leader of the Firbolg. Slane is named after him. He is the one who supposedly felled all the trees in Brunaborna. He cut down all the trees. We focused on him heavily in episode 1, 2, and 3. And he's the first High King of Ireland, Sláine Macdella. So he had a group called the Galón, and the Galón Firbolg. So the Galón, they are a group of Firbolg. And then you had the Fiordownan in Ulster, so they were a separate group. And then you also had where are the other ones? Where does it say it here now? Saying then, Gannon had Connacht, and Rudrick had Sláine, Firbolg, 2 parts. So there was another, I don't know where the other one is there. It must be there somewhere. But you had three Firbolg, three different clans essentially. And I think that they are the clans of the Normans. Essentially, they are the clans of the sons of Noah, going back, and they are actually kings of Atlantis. These Firbolg kings, like, they are in the Canal Atlantean civilization, is where they are. So the Tuatha Dé Danann, I would consider almost like a branch of the Firbolgs, because they all come from the children of Maid. They all come from the Nemedians, which we discuss in great detail in one of the episodes. And so they are all Nemedians that spread to different parts of the world and then came back to Ireland, but they were all separate lineages when they came back. I'm not sure as to did they ever leave and come back, or did they just came once and then they just had stories of different interpretations of stories, then made it look like they left and came back. But the Tuatha Dé Danann are the race of gods that are involved in both of the battles of Moytura. They instigated the first battle when they invaded, supposedly, and they fought the Fomorians in the second battle. Once again, we have to ask ourselves, are we looking at the same race fighting an external race. Like once again, like the end of Atlantis, it seems like the existing races were not, they wouldn't have done this to each other. I have this feeling that like the destruction that we see and the destruction that we saw on the landscape and the full end of the world, for some reason, like they were so, they this race of people were so under threat from some invader that their whole world ended completely, like obliterated. So what was this threat? They just did not. I cannot see that they did this to each other. Um, and these races were just like they were not destroyers, even though they are painted as. But what the tales seem to show me is that the invaders, the slaves who have revolted against the masters, the St. Patrick's, the Joseph, the Ishmael of the Bible, um, Marduk possibly, Angus maybe, who revolted. So lots to take in, and that's a wild ride. And the end of it and the invasion seems to be reflected with the Milesians. And that's where the end of Ireland as we know it, or end of Old Ireland, came. So the Milesian invasion, which we went into detail, and we equated the Milesians also with the invasion of St. Patrick, the end of essentially the end of the old pagan world. You could also equate Milesians to Vikings, but maybe Patrick was that the invading force? So we're not going to go into the history of the Milesians. We are going to look at the serpents and dragons. This little quote here: "No country in Europe is so associated with the serpent as Ireland, and none has so many myths and legends connected with the same." So there was something going on with the serpent in Ireland, and St. Patrick abolished the serpent. And St. Patrick, the story of St. Patrick as a slave, is something that we looked at in great detail. We looked at the places where St. Patrick went to. A lot, like he went to a lot of places, blessing all of the places, and we considered when he was blessing them, was he filling them with mud? Like all of these, like, is there a fortress under there? Like, this is what we're talking about. Look at these places where he goes to Slane. All of these places is where Patrick went. Cashel, important place. We didn't look too much into Cashel. St. Patrick went to all these places. We looked at the Mamtruck Mountains. We went into detail in all these places. So all of these slides that I'm going through here, there's great detail on all of them. And I've left out so much that, like, I couldn't even begin to go through the amount of information that was put together. Getting through it, I'm not even sure is it coming across, to be honest. There's a lot of writing there, but I'm hoping that there's a bit of talking that's breaking it up, and that I'm not sure if you can follow the thought. If you follow the series, you can definitely follow the thought. But I'm hoping as well that there's an element of that if you don't know the story, that you can kind of pick into the story somehow, from this way of me delivering it in a big high level overview. So essentially, what the research that I concluded from the research is the idea of the Rus people and the Empire of Rus, the Empire of Ross, and that these were the original. They were the people of Atlantis, or they maybe not Atlantis, but they were the people of a crystal civilization, crystal canal civilization, and that crystal canal civilization could, it could be seen as also the Norman people and the Etruscans the Romans. Um, it was all one people. It was different than today, and distance was irrelevant. So we've got the Rus people, the Empire of Rus, and these are the people that were defeated by the invader, whoever the invader is. And we're going to look a bit at that, and we're going to see if we can identify a bit more about this invader. So when we were looking at the countryside of Ireland, we came across an awful lot of mind-blowing revelations. We looked at many areas. We looked over here. This is the Boyne Valley area. We looked over here in Moytura. And we also dotted around the country into various places, here, there, and everywhere. So, as part of the journey and studying the mythology of all of those people that I just mentioned, we came to the conclusions that the land is heavily masoned or masonried. There is limestone walls, bridges, aqueducts, buildings, temples, cathedrals, canals, rivers, ports, you name it, pyramids. It's everywhere. We discovered that there was a canal on the River Boyne as a smoking gun of a canal system that used to be an old canal system. We looked at gigantic masonry. This one here, the Boyne Viaduct, just huge. Here's an obelisk near the River Boyne in the Boyne Valley. More just odd masonry just sticking out everywhere. We went to Carbery Castle, the Well of Segis, so Nuada, one of the kings of the Tuatha De Danann, the original king of the Tuatha De Danann. Was his well, this was his castle. And then we looked at the top of it, and you see the top of his hill. He's got all of this odd infrastructure sitting up there. We looked into all of the castles and the west in Mayo, in the area of Moytura. We looked at all of this area. And we saw it's all in ruins, but it's all heavy masonry. We looked at the dry canal of Cong, a dry canal that connected Loch Mask to Loch Corrib, where a lot of stories of the battles took place. Then we looked at underground. We said, what's under the ground? We looked at Court Cans, souterrains. We looked at the Hill of Tara in County Meath. We remarked that there is a known underground temple complex, so-called temple complex. And then as time developed, we realised that there's actually a gigantic structure underneath here, and that this is just the top, and it just slopes down, and it's just something huge. All of these hills, we started to discover then all of these hills had something under them. This is the top of the Hill of Tara, just a random cross. I looked at, this is Nouth, underground, once again, call them passage tombs. It's not a passage tomb, this is a gigantic mega structure. You could see down here, we started to notice the walls, or that the edges were just so nicely angled, like we see all of the star forts, and we could see the land just sloping down. We start to see a completely different picture of the landscape emerge. We looked at the ruins of the abbeys, the healing centres, where this civilization healed themselves. More masonry. The Rend in Shankus, one of the books that we looked at. We remarked at the ships. Were the ships in the bays, were they the ships of the invader, or were they the ships of the invaded? We looked at more masonry. This is Slane here. And we can see here each one would have a channel maybe going through it. Each separate canal, each one up to the hill of Slane. Souterrains, we looked at souterrains. What is a souterrain? This is on the hill of Slane as well. And we looked at these things and we said, I wonder, is that a natural formation or is that actually a gigantic fortress? And we started to really wonder then. And this is Ben Bulben. The last one was Ben Bulben too. We're looking at Ben Bulben and we're seeing the terracing at the side. We're looking at the top. We're seeing that these could be columns that are just eroded. We're seeing the star shapes in the ground. And where our suspicions are getting heightened. We're looking at star cities. We're wondering. Then we're looking at Mexico. And we're saying, right, everything in Mexico is covered in dirt. Here's a pyramid covered in dirt. Here's another pyramid. We see the tech on top of the pyramid. We start to think about our own tech. We start to think about our own cathedrals. We would start to wonder about what's going on top of the hills. Why is there tech on top of the hills? And what's under the hill of Slane? What's under the hill of Tara? Is this what we're looking at, you know? And then we just start to keep considering. And it's all under the ground, and there's pyramids, and there's huge buildings, and then these huge buildings, then they have huge sides on them, which are sometimes, if you cover that in mud, you know, it could be the side of a mountain, you know, or it could be the size of a giant hill or a big cliff face. And the lines are so sharp on everything. Everything is sharp. It's all looking really good, really new, not old. Like we've got just mounds. Like we went to Clew Bay in one of the episodes where you see drowned mounds. So if you drown these, they're called drumlins. We have them in Clew Bay. But once again, what is under these? What is under these mountains and hills, and what are they? So we're looking at the Irish landscape with these eyes, and we're wondering to ourselves, we're saying, is this what's under the ground? Are we looking at massive star civilizations? Was this place just absolutely mapped out to the last with some sort of triangular terraforming that covered everywhere? And what happened to it? Why is it all now covered in mud? We started thinking about mountains and mounds in Ireland. You know, is this what's under a mound? You know, is this a mountain? Is this a mound? The world of those fear bullocks and the Normans, is this the world that they were operating in? You know, they're just all destroyed. They're all covered now. We started coming to the conclusion that there's some sort of mega wells, that they're mining wells, and that they're used for the extraction of minerals. And they're also used they're multi-purpose probably. They pump the water around the Canal civilization, no doubt. They use the water in order to extract the minerals. We found that it's likely that a lot of the mud that they came from these wells, that basically all the wells, they just spewed out everything that was in them onto the landscape. You see the main towns of Ireland are also star fortified, star fort design. We found then Tyrcrone, County Meath. We found our smoking gun, a star fort buried in the ground in some random town in the middle of nowhere. And we were investigating the landscape then. We're looking for star forts everywhere. And then we come across starforts.org and we see that, wait a minute, there's a lot of work on star forts. I knew there was work on it, but I never realized that we've actually got classifications now. Canal systems, complex system of canals, major star cities and megalopolis. Just absolute ginormous systems with these star fortifications dotted about them. which are now pretty much covered as mounds all over the country. And then so we start wondering that, like, are these mounds, so what's under all of these hills and these mountains all over here? What's under them? And that's where the journey kicked up. And we started to see the patterns of stars in mountains. And we followed. We can see that it slopes down here, slopes down to the back. This is Keshkaran in Mayo. And we can see patterns, and we're like, wait a minute, it looks like it's almost like this thing just exploded on top of itself and just splodged down everywhere. And we see the cave systems, and we're like, the smoking guns are everywhere. We start to wonder then, like, are these gigantic hills and are these mountains actually just big, huge, mega fortifications, mega wells? Is that why the gods were always associated with mountains? Because this was their homes. So then we went around the place and we looked at more. We looked at Ben Bulben. So this is Ben Bulben in Sligo. Here's Ben Bulben again from another angle. And if you go into the videos, you can see all of the information. There's detail. We pan around, we look at it from different angles. This is just a selection that I could pick out. We examine the edges, we examine some of the patterns as we tell the story of the mythology going through it. Croagh Patrick, where Patrick blessed. And then we look back at the Boyne Valley. We see here the sloping down into the major canal system. This is the Boyne Canal as well. There's a canal system running here. And we look through these and we start to consider, I wonder what happened. But we start to get the picture that the landscape was fully crystal star citied out. All of these lines, they're all walls. This is the edge. This is Slane. So here we see Slane. It's just sloping down. It's like just a gigantic. Like this is the size of a big wall, and that leads down into the. Then that slopes down again here. You can see it's like slopes. Then it kind of terraces, and then it goes up again, and then at the top. So this is the epic journey that we've been on. And we're going to have to do a part 2 for episode 10 to finish it. So I'm going to see you in part 2, the final episode, I'm pretty sure. Thanks very much for watching. It's been epic. Think good thoughts, of course, and great to have you watching.